Liquid Liner Notes, a podcast that brings you interviews from the beverage and music industries. I'm your host, Danny, aka Hip Hops on Instagram. For this week's episode, I have the Midwest area sales manager of Seattle Cider Company and founder of Doom Movement, Ian Penrose. Ian, thank you for coming over.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
And I wanted to also say thank you because you were one of the first reps to reach out to me through my Instagram a long time ago. And we can talk more about forehands who you were with at the time, but that was something that really tickled me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you were the first brewery or whatever to recognize me, and I was like, this is awesome.
That's cool. That's really cool. I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I've told anyone really about
That's
it.
That's awesome.
You're and you've always been gracious and nice and met up with me the first time, and it was always a good conversation. So I wanted to bring you here because you have a wide swath of in the beverage industry. You were on the obviously the consumer side, and then you were also on the the maker side in terms of sales and everything. But then you also were helping to run restaurants and bars.
Yeah.
And I know in 2009 you were working for Rocking Horse.
Yeah. So Rocking Horse was a spot I was on the opening team there. It was a really kind of happenstance kind of thing that happened when we got on, but I started out literally door and bar back, and then by a few years in, I was running Rocking Horse for a few, I guess I was there until, I don't know, I guess 14, and then moved. The guys that owned it opened up Crown Liquors up the street.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a cool, unique time in a much different Logan Square. It had already changed a lot by that point, but we were there kind of in that inflection point that really flipped that neighborhood to how it is now. But I mean, when we opened that same summer, I think that same summer that we opened, by that fall, Longman and Eagle had opened on one end of Milwaukee, and then Revolution had opened the brew pub. So we were kind of this place in the middle, and the stuff was still over on the square, but we became a really standby neighborhood joint, and just I literally text those dudes, we were on a text thread today.
Yeah. And is that craft beer and food, or what?
It was craft beer. We started out, I think we had 12 beer lines, and then we expanded out. I think we got up to 24 draft lines, and we hosted some the major stuff at the time for beer events. We would do Craft Beer Week was always real wild. I know we had 2 years, we had a petting zoo come through until we were that's not probably sanitary.
Yeah.
They're we'll just set it up in the pool room. It's cool. And I was there's chinchillas and
sounds pretty exotic.
Yeah. I don't know where this lady came from, but that was with I forget why we did that one. It was an animal themed tap takeover for breweries.
That's so funny.
But yeah, we did that. We did we did some BCS stuff for sure. We did a lot of the bells. I remember we did a Hop Slam Firkin draft night. It was wild. Some of the cool stuff that
that's something I feel people who just got into craft beer in the last 5 years probably don't even know what a Firkin is.
Yeah, I'm totally aging myself here. I feel
Yeah, I remember going to Fobab where one of the features was running a firkin of Bourbon County through coffee beans or something else. That was a time period of a couple of years, I feel like.
For sure.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And then so you went from there, and I didn't know it was the same owners, but so then to Crown Liquors, they are sort of a unique concept. And I'll let you speak more to it, but I don't know that everywhere in the country has slashies. So do you want to speak to that? What?
Yeah, for sure. So we ended up, we took the business over, and it was a license that really, I mean, I don't know if it exists anymore or not. I think at the time they told us it wasn't really, they were sort of grandfathered license, but basically you had a package store up front, and we had a hallway, but there was a bar attached to the package store. And when we opened it, or when we took it over, it had been the bar that it had been since I think I'm gonna mess up the timeline, but it had been since the 40s,
decades.
Yeah. I remember old timers would come in and they're oh yeah, the bar used to be in the middle of the room, blah blah, and they would just kind of point around the room to how it used to be set up and stuff, and it was a really cool experience to kind of come in and be a part of that community, and get to see, we knew we were gonna do a remodel and kind of do the whole thing. But when we came in the beginning to sort of just get our legs under us there, it was just a really unique and like lovely experience to like build a bar from the ground up in a community. That was just super excited to see how we were going to do it. And we were able to do some really incredible things there.
Yeah.
It was a fun one.
I was just trying to like rack my brain around new slashies, and like Beer Miscuous is the only one I can think of. It's in a city.
Yeah.
That is newer.
Right. And I think you're probably right. Like I can't think of another one either.
And I don't know how they did it. I'm sure they had to jump through some hoops. Or
sure.
Maybe they had an alderman on their side. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, Chicago is a weird place politically for those who aren't from around here. And then real quick before we move on to your next career stop,
sure.
Was working in these places sort of like what introduced you to craft beer, or what got you into the beverage industry as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, before that, I had like, I really didn't work in hospitality at all. My first job ever was I was in a kitchen, and then kind of didn't do much with like in hospitality at all until Rocking Horse again, and kind of got into it that way. Definitely opened my eyes to craft beer. I think before that I was light beer drinker, like a lot of, and still am, like love them, but kind of like exclusively at that point. And really kind of opened up to like what different styles. And I remember like that was where I had my first sour. That's where I had a Saison that kind of like melted my brain a little bit, and like had these beers that I was just like, oh shit, like this is like craft.
This is possible.
This is craft shit. Like people are like taking time and effort into this in a different way, and really kind of shift my perspective on what just like beer is and what it can be.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I know you made I feel like you hear this in craft beer a lot, especially with all the like brewers and stuff, but you made the jump from corporate America to, you were just like, I'm done with corporate, and decided to go into the hospitality industry.
No, it was definitely a circumstantial.
Oh, okay. But you just loved it then. Like
I did. So I finished grad school in 2008, and then recession hit, and I was just kind of like hustling for about a year, and ended up the same week I got hired on at Rocking Horse, and I got a job with a carpenter, and I built ottomans for the Ritz-Carlton. We did like 8 like giant ottomans, and then he ran out of work, and Rocking Horse had hours for me. So like literally like was a circumstantial kind of situation that got me into it. But once I was there, I realized just like how much I loved it, and being around people in that capacity. Like there is some beauty in sort of just like being part of the vibe of like setting the vibe, and like having like a room, and like you look around, and whether you're working the floor or you're like managing the place, you kind of look up and you just see everybody's having a great fucking time, and you're like, nailed it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're like DJing, like
for sure. And like, I mean, it's where I learned about like a little bit more attention to detail in terms of like the music and the lighting, and like where you need to be, and like how things need to be set up, and just sort of like those things that like I think intentionally take for granted when you go out, right? Like that's all so thought out.
Yeah.
And like that's also like there's so much put into that to make sure that you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And just like learning those different nuances of it was just like eye-opening. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. My service industry experience, when I was in like the end of high school, and then the beginning of undergrad, I worked at Bennigan's. So it was
nice. Nice.
Down in Florida.
Yeah.
So then I've worked in retail a bunch, like through college, but that's like the limit of my service experience. But no, it's awesome. I feel like I don't know, it sounds like cheesy or whatever, but you always seem like you're interested in people and like a kind person. So like I get, like I can see
for
why
sure
you were like attracted to that, and why it worked for you.
Yeah, it's just fun to be able to like you have your regulars, and you have people who suck, and like that's all part of it. Like I think I got to learn how to learn about people. Like you're just seeing people, and you can get really jaded and you can get really angry about it at times, but there's real opportunity to just like learn how to talk to people and meet people where they are. To like, sometimes it's because you need the tip, sometimes it's because like you're having a bad night and you just want to like be able to chill with somebody and talk while you're serving them. Sometimes it's like you're having a great night and like you just want to make sure that everybody is too. So there's different reasons for it, but like just knowing that like every night you're going in, and it's kind of your responsibility to be on in that way of like beyond just like being polite and courteous and stuff. It's like the opportunity was to just be curious and learn about people.
Yeah.
And like gain that perspective and experience for sure.
Yeah. It's one of the, I mean, you can like ask someone a question about maybe a t-shirt they're wearing or whatever, and it just sort of like changes their whole.
I learned more about music there, like just bartending. Like you meet people who are, you meet musicians, you meet artists, you meet people, all walks of life, right?
Yeah.
And you can get those perspectives, but like to the things that I learned from just like that constant, nightly sort of investment in people was cool.
It's a good segue to how the clientele changed with moving to your next stop, which was Sable. Am I saying that right? Yeah, Sable.
I had a brief and triumphant slate at Sable. I think I was there like 90 days, and it was awesome. Like everybody, I learned at that point. I learned more about service than I'd ever known.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, I didn't know about it until I realized that you worked there. But it's in River North, which is a different neighborhood. Logan Square, what we were talking about before, is more of like a hipstery, younger crowd.
Yeah.
Whereas River North is more, I mean, this is oversimplifying it or putting a judgment on it, but it's like more bro-y, people who have more money kind of thing.
For sure. And also Sable, to put it into context, like when cocktails became when it was like
yeah,
they sort of like moved in, I feel like in that time, like what was that, like 14, like 15, I guess, like around that time, everybody started having like Rocking Horse, we had a conversation, we're like, we got to add a cocktail list. And they're like, we are a beer and a shot bar. And I'm like, we need like 4-touch cocktails and we just got to do it. Like people expected, they come in asking, like it became part of it. But Sable was sort of one of those places that was like the pioneer. You had like, oh man, I'm blanking on the name, and it's right across from Big Star, but like it's like one of those cocktail joints. It was one of the first cocktail joints that sort of like put it forward in terms of more than just like, we're going to put this in a glass, here you go. Like we were serving stuff on like mini Zen gardens, and we were doing like, like it was an encyclopedic book, and everybody's cocktail that was in there had been like tested and then added. And it was like an honor to be in this book. Like it was a different attitude towards service.
Are they still around, Sable?
No, I don't think they are. I think I drove by it the other day or a while back, and they were closed. They were in the Hotel Palomar. It was part of like the Kimpton group. And it was great. I loved everybody that I worked with there. Everybody was super awesome. And it was just like, when you talk about like people that I didn't like, customers that were like a little bit different, a little bit more difficult to appease, I guess is a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time screaming at the ceiling of the service elevator.
But I mean, with that situation, you learn from everything, and I'm sure
absolutely, yeah,
helped you. And then from Sable, you moved to the creator side of things. I mean, you weren't creating, but you moved to the brewery.
Yeah.
Four Hands.
Yeah.
And I know you're from St. Louis originally.
I am, yeah.
And how was that something that you wanted to jump to from, working in restaurants / bars to being out of that life?
For sure. Yeah, it was at the time. So I grew up in St. Louis. We actually launched when I worked at Rocking Horse. We were one of their first like launch parties for when Four Hands came to Chicago. So that's how I met a lot of those dudes. And they, we had stayed in touch, and it was sort of just one of those, like, if you're ever looking for somebody, like, I know a guy, kind of thing. And so I, again, really enjoyed being at Sable. The hours were hard. It was a grind. You were there a lot. Your days off were spent like kind of catching up on the week. It was a grind. So realizing that this was like kind of something that might be a little bit easier in that kind of context, kind of made it a little bit easier to make the jump.
For sure.
Hours were going to be a little bit better.
Yeah. More reliable hours in terms of like, I remember having to like close and then open in like retail life, but it was like, that's miserable. But
managing brunch shifts would like start at 5 a.m. at a hotel, and you're just like, all right, fine. Like this is cool, but like, this isn't ideal for me personally.
Yeah.
So it just offered a different opportunity. And I think I at the time I looked at it as, I was definitely curious about getting back into beer in a different context. Mm-hmm. And I love that brewery. I do love that brewery, but like at the time I was just like fanboying so hard for it.
Yeah.
So it was cool to just kind of like, I think I I put it on Instagram, but I was like, this is like getting called up for spring training or something. Like this is just feels like the most wild experience, you know? So like it truly was like the most, I mean, it felt at that time like super prolific to just be like, okay, we like went from this thing, now we're going to go do this thing.
Yeah.
And like to be able to rep my hometown in like my adjacent hometown is like I love most cities equally for different reasons, you know? So it just really was like a very exciting opportunity to kind of like see what I could do with it. Like we didn't really there weren't like expectations really to say, like it was sort of like, all right, what do you think you can do? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and we got to do some really cool stuff. We got to, you know, we sponsored a bunch of Riot Fest shows, got to meet, you know, a bunch of different musicians and stuff like that. And it's just like sort of went into it with like, okay, well, if there are no rules, like then let's do this let's just do something and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And like I didn't really know what I was doing, but sometimes it worked out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's I remember Four Hands was like one of the hyped breweries at the time when they were coming in here, because I remember everyone being like, oh, is like Madagascar gonna be distributed? Like it was a different time in craft beer
for sure.
That was
for sure
like the chase times, like you would like go store to store looking for stuff. But that's awesome. And like you said, being from there, I'm from St. Pete, Florida, and when I left there, it was like Cigar City was around, and they were even fairly new. But then now when I go back home, there's like a brewery on every corner. It's wild.
Yeah.
But so doing sales, is that something that you saw yourself doing? Like you're kind of selling, I guess, when you're in the restaurant and the bar.
Yeah, and it was no. To answer your question, no. It was sort of like I kind of like looked up, like, oh, okay, we're here now. Like this is how I'm not really sure how we got here, but we are. And it was like the role itself was like sales and marketing. Like I think my like title was marketing manager, and it's sort of like it gave me at least the opportunity to figure out like how we could put ourselves in positions of visibility, and also by addition make those sales, right? So like I didn't have to just focus on like, I don't know, drilling grocery stores and stuff like that. You know, it was like, also we were smaller, like we weren't in a ton of grocery stores. There was like a lot of independent stores. So again, it's like going around and like there is a certain luxury, I think, in knowing like most of the people you're going to go talk to are as excited about the thing that you're selling as you are. Yeah. You know, at that point, there were a ton of craft breweries, sure, but everyone was like pretty equally excited about all of them, right? Yeah. And like if you had something new coming out, or like if depending on like what season you had coming back, like you kind of knew where to go and who to talk to, and it really like knowing that like really made it fun to get out there and like figure out how you could do some really cool stuff. Like there was definitely times where it was like, okay, so who's all partnering up on this thing, and it would be like 4 or 5 different breweries once we realized like we could get more done, you know, doing some bigger events and stuff like that. And it was just sort of like, you just got to like throw some parties with your buds. And like, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, because like, obviously there's dollars involved, but like for what I was doing and when you were really in it, like it really was like an exciting experience to just be able to like see if you could pull this thing off with the people who were as equally excited about it as you were.
Yeah. And that time, I feel like that was at the time where like craft beer couldn't lose money. Like you could open any brewery and you were like
literally
bankroll at a time. But so that's from Four Hands, you transitioned to your current role, which I said in the offset, but and correct me if the title was incorrect, but the Midwest area sales manager.
That is correct. Yeah.
Seattle Cider Company. And do you want to say a little bit about how that happened? I know it was early 2022 that you.
Yeah, so a good friend of mine, Garrett Sweet, shout out to that beautiful man. He had the job, and he and I worked adjacent to each other. Like Four Hands and Seattle Cider were in the same distributor, so it was really easy for us to kind of like, go out and to sell together. It was sort of like we had it, you got your hops, you got your apples, let's go. So we kind of got working together like that, and it was sort of like he moved on to does photography for Foxtrot Market.
Oh, yeah, they're going crazy right now.
Yeah, and it was pretty funny. We were sitting at Middlebrow. We were all just like hanging out, having some food and beers, and he got a message, and he was like, "I think they want to talk to me about a job." And we're like, and he lives without giving his location away, he lives nearby, and we're like, "Go take that phone call, dude. Like, go." And he came back and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take it." I was like, we were all like, "Congrats," like high fives and stuff. And then I was like, "Cool, I'm gonna interview for your job." You know, it was just like at that moment, it was like it was time. It felt like it was time for me to kind of like figure out something new, see what I could do beyond just forehands. And so interviewed for the job. And again, like I kind of knew the whole book. Like we had sold each other's product essentially. So like coming in, it was just really easy to kind of get in there and know how it was going to work. So they went, did the interview process, and they asked me if I wanted the job. I was like, shit, yeah, let's do it. So I've been doing that since May of last year.
How I have a limited knowledge of distribution and everything like that, but I know you're signed on to a distributor, but then some brands choose to have like a rep in the city. Or are you, so you were saying you were selling each other's product. Are you kind of just like,
I say that, but it's more of like, we would go places together. We would set up events together. Like we were doing, we were running in the same bocce leagues. Like when I say like selling each other's product, it was more like, I guess I should say more of like, we just knew each other's brands, and we would say like, "Oh, you're looking for another partner. I got somebody."
Yeah.
So it was sort of like, we were just kind of like more like looking out for each other's brands more than selling them. I guess.
And I know, I hear that there's a lot of places where if you're in the same book and they're only dealing with one distributor, places are eager to, sort of like get all their taps filled or their shelves filled by a distributor if they can, because it just makes their life easier.
It makes makes a lot of people's lives easier.
And so moving from beer to cider, were you like super into cider, or was it just something that you just saw as a new challenge that you wanted to pursue?
A little bit of both, I think. I like cider a lot. I think it's truly, I think it's one of the oldest beverages, right? Like, I don't know how I'm going to really butcher this one, right?
No,
but I love cider. I love cider. I drank a lot of Seattle cider before like starting the job. But I didn't really have a ton of actual like logistical and working knowledge of the process and everything. So that was a really fun experience to kind of learn. Just, I went out, got onboarded, and I met, did like a cider school essentially, and just learned like the very basics of like how it works and what you do, and why certain ciders taste a certain way as opposed to others and all that stuff. So still just like very basic working knowledge. But yeah, I think it did feel like an opportunity to learn a different side of the beverage industry more than anything. It was like, I think I had a good knowledge. I feel like I have a good knowledge of craft, and doing my time with cocktails and just felt like it was something new to learn. And I think that really like gets me excited in a lot of different ways, but like definitely keeps my interest when there's just new stuff to like new systems, new processes, like we get to talk about something else.
yeah. Cause there's a million ways you can do hops and all that other stuff. But when you start talking about cider, it's definitely much more of like a natural, it's more environmentally friendly. I mean, there's different things that you can like sell on it, and it's a interesting concept. But out there, do they so they have their facility where they press their own apples, or do they get the juice shipped
So as far as I understand, we get our juice from an orchard about 2 hours east of Seattle.
Okay.
And everything comes in pressed in like when I was out there, they were loading in the juice, and it's like a tanker truck that shows up, and there's hoses, and like it's a whole commercial process. It's pretty wild. But yeah, so the thing about with Seattle is like we use 100% Washington apples. There's very little. We have that Odyssey, which we can talk about at some point. But like we basically like we have one brand in our book that we add sugar to, and to help get the ABV up essentially. But everything else is just like naturally occurring sugars and yeast. So it's a very like super simplified process when you think about it, and to realize like the nuance and the different flavor profiles that can be achieved is like pretty mind boggling.
Yeah. So
it's cool to like. It's definitely been a cool journey to learn, and again, like it's a different cider community is like they're awesome. Like it's just a drastically different
clientele.
group from clientele and group from craft beer and from cocktail and from from wine. So it's cool to just be welcomed in to that community as well. It's a really cool group of people.
That is awesome. You were mentioning that you guys have a commitment to get all your apples from Washington State, and so that sort of gives it like a terroir kind of like
for sure
wine aspect of it. Like it's a Washington, like a Pacific Northwest flavor profile of apples. I mean, I'm not that I know a lot about apples, but I'm assuming that's a thing. But that is awesome. So I was going to ask about some of the events. I was going to ask you about the education level, but so they took you through like a cider class where they were teaching you how everything operates, and how much of that do you have to translate to the consumer? Like, do you find that the education level for people that are consumers is maybe different than in the craft beer world?
Yeah, I think that in the cider community, it's well, like any community, right?
Yeah. There's people who know.
They know a lot. I feel like people in the cider world that are like dialed into cider are a lot more aware of like ingredients and processes and sort of like why things taste a certain way they do. Once you get outside of that, the sort of the knowledge levels, like it drops drastically. I think at least in the Midwest, and like from my experience too, of like Chicago's a little bit different and obviously than Milwaukee, than Madison even, and sort of like having those conversations around cider, like sometimes saying like, this is made with apples, and people are like, oh shit, okay, cool. That's like the kind, like people in the certain places in the Midwest have like yet to conceptualize that like this is a thing that occurs and it exists as such, so but I think that people are eager to learn, and I think that once a consumer sort of understands what they're drinking and why we're making it, to be honest with you, like people get on board like pretty quick. And that's, I mean, like any interest, I mean, you have people who are interested at certain levels, so they want to know a little more than I went to one cidery here in Michigan, and I was like talking to the guy about different apple profiles and yeast and stuff like that. So it's all interesting, and you kind of just have to like gauge how interested someone is, because you don't want to be that person talking someone's ear off when they're just tuned out. I think that for me personally, like I get excited by kind of explaining a very like a very high level version of the process, right? Like I get excited to tell people about, our Honeycrisp is a dry cider that we back sweeten with Honeycrisp apple juice. So like what you're tasting is Honeycrisp juice, and as opposed to like additive sugar.
And so real quick, back sweetening, I just want to make sure I understand. That's like where you like everything's fermented and then you sort of add some more apple juice so it will stop fermenting.
But it could be apple juice, it could be pineapple juice, it could be like any sort of like any sweetening component to change the flavor profile.
Yeah.
Right. So like talking about that and like why we use certain yeast on certain ciders and as opposed to others, and like what that means for the cider and stuff like that. So like those are the things that like I think that it helps me sell in a different way, just specifically because of how like enthusiastic I feel about it. It's like I feel like that's my best foot forward for getting someone else excited about it.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a certain amount of obviously necessary knowledge and I guess language to have, but I think more importantly, like once you're in there, it's like you can just as easily say like, yo, this is really fucking good. Like, give it a shot, and like that works sometimes. But I think also being able to say like, we use champagne yeast on our dry cider because it gives it that effervescent vibe. Like that's a cool thing to just be able to have and say like people can get with that.
Yeah, those who want to like take something from that can take it. Otherwise, they can just drink whatever they think tastes good.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I was gonna ask, so your day to day, what does it look like day to day for you? Like, are you every day going to different shops or restaurants?
It's a little bit of everything. For instance, like today I was sending emails and whatnot, and I had a ride along, so I had to go meet up with one of our reps, and like we went around town and made some introductions and stuff like that. Some days it's all admin work, some days it's virtual meetings, some days it's out in the field meeting with buyers and stuff too. So I kind of look at it as like I plan my week out as much as I can. But I think like anything else, like stuff comes up, and like our, you know, my boss and our team, we really do kind of recognize that like the job that I do, that we do on the sales team is not necessarily like a rigid sort of like 9 to 5. Like there's you know, there's some weekends and stuff like that, but like you might be going out to a bar at night just to like do a tasting or see somebody that you haven't been able to catch for a while, or like whatever the case may be. Like you find the sort of like, for me, I like to look at it as like, if the opportunity is there, let's take that opportunity, you know, and kind of like work around that sort of premise, as opposed to like, I'm going to be on the computer from 9 to 11 and then I'm going to be doing this kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Being fluid. And I know like we've talked about your background with restaurants and bars, but that's a lot more chaotic. So it's like, you're willing to do it a little bit here and there. It sounds like it's a lot more healthy, like a healthy work-life balance.
For sure. Oh, and like, yeah, I mean, everybody's like that first and foremost, you know, they're like, take care of your stuff, like make sure you're good, you know? So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's just been I think for me too, is like, I like to be able to move around. I like to be able to like, not have to be, I love driving around town. Like you're just seeing different neighborhoods, and you know, even like getting out of town for trips to like, when we do have to do Wisconsin visits and stuff, and just like being on the road. I had to go up to La Crosse over the summer, and I just took a bunch of like state highways there, and it was like one of the most beautiful scenic drives I had done in a long time. And it's just like, just finding those moments and opportunities to like, well, we're gonna go do this, like let's make it cool.
Yeah,
you know,
make it a nice little road trip out of it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. They I know I was gonna ask, are you doing taps and package then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we got draft and package.
Is it tough? Because I know there's, like we talked about earlier, where some people like to just maintain like one distributor if they can. And I know there's like a big distributor here that has a big cider company attached to some of the other brands that people want to sell. Is it tough to like crack into tap handles, do you find, or is it?
I think it just depends on where you're looking to go, and I think that it sort of I guess that it comes down to, well, it comes down to a lot of things, but I think that it can be difficult, but I think also like, again, it's different with some of the differences with cider is that like there's less room for it, but also like once it's kind of there, people tend to stick with what they're doing, you know, and I think that like that's in a lot of ways that's really unique to cider. Like I was fighting a lot harder in beer to maintain a permanent draft handle as opposed to cider, you know, and I think that just like there's less of a demand for the new, I think. Okay, yeah. You know, again, like it's a much smaller category, but like there's less of a
gotta catch them all kind of.
Right. Yeah. There's not as much like, what new ciders do you have, as opposed to like, do you have ciders? You know, so like from that standpoint, it kind of like cider a lot of times falls into just the gluten-free category on a menu. So when you look at that menu, you go, okay, well, you have these seltzers and you have these things, like you don't have a cider, you know, would you be interested?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It's a blessing and a curse, because I feel like with beer, people know, okay, so obviously an IPA is way different than a stout, and then you have the lagers, but with cider, from an outsider, I feel like, you know, 10 years ago, I was like, a cider is a cider is a cider. Sure. You know, sure. I've learned through my like craft beer journey about cider and the differences, but I'd almost feel like there'd be some people that are like, oh, I already have a cider on, like it's the same thing as what you have, but you may have a dry cider versus a sweet cider. And
totally. Yeah. That has changed. I think in the last couple of years, I've seen more places willing to not just try like, oh, I already have a dry, I don't need another one, to people being like, what's your dry? Or like, you know, and like, you're not necessarily taking another placement from somebody as so much as like, maybe you're adding one, you know?
People are willing to have two ciders on.
100%. Like, and again, like as cider as a category matures, you start to see more people, like you do have your like sweet cider drinker, and you have your dry cider drinker, and you have your cider drinker that wants berries, and like almost exclusively, you know? So it's like, those are the things that you kind of like, you look to say, like when I go in literally like today, like went into a store and looked at what they already carried, and I was like, hey, this is what you don't have that is what we're offering. Like kind of having that conversation of like, you're not trying to go in and sell in the full book all the time. Like just knowing like what works. Cause like essentially like if the goal is to get something in the door and then you can work from there, like that's better than being like, I have to have this one thing in there. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of at least how I approach it. But again, it just lends itself to being able to tell even a buyer, like, you know, by being like, oh, I didn't know about imperial ciders, right? Yeah. And then they can go and tell that story. And so the education has to start at some point. And like, if you can get that started from multiple points, I guess is even better.
Yeah, that is. I know. I'm like, I don't want to get like too deep into the nitty gritty, but like, I love like nerding out about like the way you're like thinking about and approaching different sales.
100%. Like that. It all matters, right? Like it's real.
Yeah, just walking in, sort of like surveying what they have and sort of being able to pick up like, okay, this person is likely to do X, Y, or Z, like totally. That kind of thing.
Yep.
The psychology of
cider. The psychology of cider.
You could write a book. So you've mentioned Wisconsin. So you're Illinois. I guess, what is your territory?
I got Illinois and Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then do you get up to Wisconsin often, or?
Yeah, I'll be there next week. We're doing like end of year business planning meetings and stuff, so I'll be up there. Normally it's been like I get up there like every 4 to 6 weeks, probably on average. Yeah.
And I know here I wanted to ask you about Apple Fest. So I know you just did that in Lincoln Square. Yeah. It was my son's birthday that weekend, so I didn't get to go out there. But I saw you were going to be out there, and it looked like it was.
It's a great time. Bottles and Cans, shout out to those dudes. They brought in a bunch of pumpkin spice apple cider, which are our fall seasonal that is here now. But so they brought it in, sold it at their tent, and I went over there and cracked beers and poured cans for them, or cracked ciders and poured for them for a little bit. So it's a great festival. Like it expanded this year. It was like much bigger. I had no idea. I showed up and I was like, this is wild.
Yeah, it's you sort of like, unless you get into it, you don't know how big the cider community is. Like I went to the Northman years ago. Yeah, I think it's, I don't remember if it's closed or changed ownership. The one
it's down on the river now. You should definitely like it's a wonderful spot down there.
And it's an all cider bar, but I can remember just the extensive tap list, and some of those are from like France or in Europe somewhere. I remember there was a couple that blew my mind, but like there was like a dry hop cider, which was really cool. Nice. And there was one that had like jalapeno in it.
Sure.
Which was awesome. So it's just cool, like the adjuncts that can play off of ciders. And then is there for Seattle cider, I know you have, so you were kind enough to bring me the Honeycrisp, which is that exclusively brewed with Honeycrisp, or you're saying you just it's back sweetened?
That's the one that we back sweeten, yeah.
Okay. And is everything sort of distroed out, or is there anything that they do have that's like, oh, this is taproom exclusive? Like, I don't know how that works.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's stuff that and I can't speak really to like all of it. I know that there's stuff that doesn't make it out this way that they're doing out there. And there's some stuff like when you mentioned the pepper, like we did years ago, we had distributed a 3 pepper cider, and it was in a 22-ounce bottle. And people still, like, literally, like, last festival I worked, somebody came up to the table and was like, you guys still make 3 pepper? And I was like, we do, but it's only out in Washington.
Yeah, that's one of those things that stuck with me. Like, one of those, it's awful. I don't even remember what the cidery was, but.
So cool. We definitely have some proprietary stuff that stays out, and we have a tasting room in Seattle called The Woods. And I don't know how many draft lines are, but like there's just like tons of cider on draft out there.
Is it near downtown, or do you know?
It is in the Soto neighborhood, south of downtown. So it's like I think it's about 2 miles south of the stadiums. Okay. Right around Georgetown.
Okay. I went to Seattle. We were only there for like 2 or 3 days, but I think we stayed downtown, but I think we primarily kind of went north into, is that Queens Anne?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a record store up there and a couple of breweries that we went to up that way. But no, I love Seattle. I always say, like, I have no plans of moving from Chicago, but it'd be hard living in Seattle when my family's in Florida.
Sure.
But that would be like the place I think I would go. I just love the idea of having mountains and the ocean and all that stuff right there.
It's wild. I like, the first time I went out there, we like dropped through the cloud cover in the plant, and it was just like the greenest place I've ever seen on earth. Like, it was just like, it didn't really make sense to me at first. I think my first thing I said, like, I got a good chuckle from somebody, but I was like, we like buy candles that just smell like your city. Like we want our bathrooms to smell like your city. I'm like, on our best day, it smells like gasolines and hot dogs here. And like, you know, like we're doing
or chocolate.
or chocolate. Yeah. And you're just like, which is cool too.
Yeah.
I love how Chicago smells, but it doesn't smell like Seattle. Like it's just it's different, you know. It's like cypress and sea salt everywhere.
Yeah, and that's just it's a beautiful city if you guys ever get a chance to go out there. I want to ask, so the packaging that you guys have, like it's pretty distinguishable packaging. You guys have like the same kind of design with the name of the label on there. You have one here, Odyssey Hard Cider, and you mentioned that earlier, but what the packaging is different on that one? Like the can looks a little different. Is that a newer?
So yeah, that's we put that out probably a little bit over a year ago. It is our imperial cider, and for our purposes, all that really means is like in our book, that's the only cider that we add sugar to get the ABV up.
Okay.
We do it with an apple concentrate, but basically we ferment out a cider. Like when you ferment out a cider, it'll always ferment out to 6.9% if you let it go the full way. So then we add additional yeast and a concentrate, and the sugar just adds to help get that ABV up.
And I've had like only like one or two, but like apple wines, which are from what I understand just like ciders, but with are they just higher ABV than that, like a 12?
I actually don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, like
I've only had like one or two. I don't know. I think it's something to do with the ABV level. But
I'm sure.
Yeah, that's I'm looking forward to trying an imperial cider. Do you get like heat on it like you would like a high ABV beer?
Kind of. I think that like for me, just because of it's like, to me it's noticeable. I don't know. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
Because like you taste it, and, like it definitely has more of like a I say like a satiny mouthfeel to it. Like it's not syrupy. It's thinner than a syrup, you know. But it has like just has like a heavier body on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a noticeably different flavor profile than a cider. I think like a lower ABV cider.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I that's one of the things I love about the beverage industry and craft beer, mostly for me, but like just the drinking experiences that you can have with different things. So I'm like looking forward to trying. I'm one of those annoying guys who likes to do the flight where I can kind of try like, even if they have multiple pilsners or multiple lagers, it's like, what makes these different? I want to taste them to see what distinguishes these. And then is there anything else you wanted to mention about any of the ciders? 'Cause I'm going to move on to the Doom movement here in a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I'll let you introduce what Doom movement is.
So Doom movement is a breath and movement, essentially like a yoga adjacent breath and movement course to what started out as strictly doom metal, and has over the years kind of broadened into kind of whatever I feel like planned, but stays mostly in the realm of like the I feel like everything that I'm trying to accomplish has at least some hand is dipping a little bit of a toe into the doom metal world in some capacity.
Yeah. And is that something that so you had mentioned to me that you were a college radio DJ. Is metal and everything just something you've kind of always been into?
Yeah, I mean, I grew. I kind of came up listening to like I was a little skater punk asshole kid, and listening a lot of like just like skate punk, hardcore, goth, all that stuff, and really didn't get into a ton of like expansive metal until that job. I worked for the college radio station, and they needed what was the loud rock manager or the loud rock manager. And I didn't really know what that meant. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then I was just like, I just started getting records, and it was just like, okay, listen to them all and like figure out which ones we can't play on the air and which ones we can and like all this stuff. And I had like, it was the first time I had like office hours. Like I had to just go and sit in the radio office, and I would get calls from like radio reps, and they're like, hey, are you playing our stuff? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, we had like 35 people listening to us on our best day, but I'm like, yeah, we got people listening. Sure. But like, but yeah, I really got into a lot more different types and genres of metal, and I mean kind of across the board with that job. But if we're talking that, yeah, for sure.
Was that like a weekly show?
Yeah, I had a Friday's time slot. I think it was like 1 to 4 in the afternoon. I called it the only show that matters, which is just like, it hurts my heart now.
Yeah.
And my points of pride was they wouldn't play it in the student union while it was on Fridays. They would put on like, it was like the only time they wouldn't have the college station on.
Yeah.
And I almost got kicked off the air because I played a song that said fuck and I didn't realize it. And there was a hearing about it and I was like,
You had to go to like the student body.
oh, I had a rep that went for me.
Man.
It was a really odd experience. It's like, I can just not do this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry guys. Like, I didn't realize.
Yeah. It's like the FCC or whatever.
Yeah. They were like taking it real seriously. So, yeah, it was a really fun experience. I think I did that for like 3 years. I think so.
Was that out at, if you want to say what college was it?
It was Elmhurst College, now Elmhurst University, out in Elmhurst, Illinois. Yeah.
Is that what brought you to Illinois?
It is. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm not really. I mean, at this point, I can't even really remember how I ended up like picking it, but it was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to this school, and like, growing up in St. Louis, I was like, I remember the first time my mom brought me to Chicago, and we stayed downtown, and like I was probably like 12. But I was like, I'm gonna move here. Like, this is where I'm gonna live, And it was this sort of like transformational experience, like summer trip, for no other reason than just like the sensory, like trying to remember back to being like that age and like seeing what Chicago is from St. Louis is just like, it's huge. It's everything,
Yeah.
So like, I kind of always wanted to be in Chicago, and that was like the first stepping stone to get there. So I was there went there and then moved in the city after I graduated.
And so I was trying to figure out how to work this into the conversation. This is as good as time as any. You were a rugby player. Did you do that at college too? Was that like something you picked up there or?
No. So my dad played, I grew up with it. I kind of just like grew up around it. And it was sort of like I came up there was like a men's soccer club. They didn't have at the time, like Elmhurst didn't have like an official like university team. And I was on the men's soccer club, and we were just playing like real teams that we were just getting destroyed. I'm like, this isn't fun. So I was like, if I'm gonna get my ass beat, I want to like do something I'm enjoying. So there was a couple dudes that lived on the floor, and we started a rugby team. We didn't really know what we were doing. My dad came up and helped us coached a few matches and got us going. And yeah, we kind of ran with it. And so the word kind of got out because we weren't we were kind of like a road club. We weren't like, we didn't have a practice facility. We didn't have a field. We just kind of like
the misfits.
Yeah, for real. So a couple of guys came out and were like, we hear you're trying to do something, like, and they kind of invited us out to their club, which ended up being Chicago West Side Condors, who I like was literally played an old boys game on Saturday with a bunch of my old teammates.
That's awesome. I had so I played baseball through high school, and one of my assistant coaches played rugby at the college. It was close to my high school.
Yeah.
And he had like, I can remember like the first day we met him, he like pulled his ear and he had like stitch marks from like where his ear had gotten ripped.
Yeah.
That was my first experience with rugby, and I was just like, holy shit. Like, this is like, they're like killing each other out there.
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, I think it's one of those things that looks absolutely chaotic, and then you play it and you're like, okay. I think for people who it sticks with, like the moment you're out there, you're like, yep, this makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, not that this is like a sports show, but I'm a big soccer fan.
Yeah.
And I know like when I first got into it, it was like, what the hell's going on? And I know when I talk to people who aren't into it, they're like, I don't understand the rules. And I feel that way about rugby. And
sure.
I've like consciously set and tried to watch it a few times when I've seen it on.
Yeah.
To try and pick up the rules. And I kind of feel like I get it, but it's one of those things that's foreign, I think, to a lot of people.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. But that is awesome. I knew that about you, and I was like, I got to get this in there somewhere.
Yeah, it was great. I played pretty. I mean, like, it's kind of one of the reasons that yoga happened. I mean, to be honest, like I had multiple shoulder injuries, right? And I couldn't like do other things, and my trainer was like, go do yoga.
Yeah.
So like it started out like I guess like in 2007. I had my first, like, had my, a decent shoulder separation, right? And
Yeah.
it was like, well, I'm just hang around until this feels better. And so it was sort of like I was living in Wicker Park. Well, yeah, like around Wicker Park, and there was a spot that did it was a hot yoga studio, and it was a walking distance. It was literally, I picked it because it was walking distance, and they gave you a free month unlimited to get you in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, that's great. We'll just do that.
And it was hot. It was hot yoga.
Yeah,
like back then.
it was the worst.
I didn't
Not
even
my
know.
thing. Like, it's just not my thing. It's there for people, and I appreciate what it is and what it can be for people. It was just like not my brand of yoga.
Suffering. No.
Yeah, no, 100%. I didn't do myself any favors. Like, I showed up the first class I showed up to, like, again, just like a shitty 20-something-year-old, like, hungover. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this thing, and like showed up and like had no idea, and I got in there, and like I made reeked the whole place up. Like, it smelled. Someone was like, somebody had a good night last night. And I was like, sorry guys, like sweating it all out in this room. Like, it was bad.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like was my very, very first starting point.
That was what got you into yoga, and then now, fast forward, you're a yoga instructor. Like, so is that something you just, once you started doing it because of the rugby injuries, you just wanted to keep doing it? Or you've been consistent?
No,
with
like I didn't do it for a long time. I kind of just like stepped away from it, and I honestly, like, I met my wife, and she was big into yoga, and it really wasn't until probably like 18, 19, I was just like, I wasn't in great shape by that point, and I didn't feel good. I couldn't even really like touch my toes anymore, and it was just like it was starting to dawn on me that like whatever version of working out or whatever version of fitness I had in mind wasn't sustainable. I wasn't keeping up with it. I wasn't doing it. And my wife actually started working at a studio part-time around the corner from our place. So we just started going, and like it was something that I could do. They had plenty of time, like time classes, but it was sort of like, it just became something that was I saw as more of a sustainable practice to keep myself fit. And that's how it started out. It was just sort of like mostly for fitness purposes, and getting more into like grounding techniques and breathing exercises, and sort of like what that could also accomplish kind of changed my point of view. So I think, I went and took a 200-hour teacher training course at Nature Yoga Sanctuary. It's no longer there. It was on Division, like right at Division Street at Damon. Took the teacher training, and that was during COVID. All right, we were in the course like as like the everything shut down, like when everything hit. So
Yeah.
We moved it virtual and everything, but at that time, sort of like how it all kind of, the culmination was like, it's really, for me at least, it was really difficult to just like get out of the insecurity of just practicing. Mm-hmm. Like, you're doing something that you're not really accustomed to doing, and you're not really sure if you're good at it, and you're pretty sure you're not good at it, but you want to be better. And so like, even like practicing on my own at home became sort of like, I don't know, like I just felt really insecure about the whole thing. But like, part of that was like, also I got really easy to like get distracted. You're at home, and like there's stuff going on, and it's really easy to just like step away. So metal music, like loud, like whatever, like that genre has always like kind of kept me focused a little bit more than other genres of music. So specifically, Sleep's Dope Smoker is like an hour-long song, right? And I could put it on, and I knew when it was over, like, okay, I'd been practicing for an hour, and I didn't have to worry about setting a timer. I didn't have to look at a clock. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. And it really helped me focus my attention on what I was trying to accomplish in terms of like the movement and the breath, and actually just like being present and centered. So like, that's kind of was like the impetus for Doom, was just me trying to get comfortable, honestly, like trying to get comfortable in my own body, figuring out how to like move around in a way that felt good.
Yeah. And I that was one of my questions, was going to be, how did you ever think to match up doom metal and yoga? Because I've had multiple people who I'm like, oh yeah, I went to one of your classes, spoiler alert for everyone, but they were like, what, like metal music and yoga? It's like the opposite of what I could possibly think I'd want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I just love that it was just two of the things that were working for you. And you're like, I feel mentally the best when I'm listening to this to do this activity. And I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be other people that do the same or agree.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that like, it's sort of, I think it paired with, honestly, like it was obviously it was an odd time for everybody. Odd's an understatement, but it was what changed for kind of like yoga. I think people practicing yoga or people working on their breath movement, peace of mind kind of stuff was that when everything shut down, it became something you could do at home, sure, but also like it effectively eliminated studios for a long time. And I think that one of the barriers of entry for people who aren't necessarily in that world is a yoga studio. It can be a really intimidating place for a lot of people. Yeah. Right. And all of a sudden we're all online and we're all in our own home, and we can do classes together, but you can turn your camera off. Yeah. And you're still with people, but you're doing it on your own. And like it made, I think, the idea of making yourself vulnerable in that way more accessible to more people. And I think that was fucking awesome.
And that's like a judgment free.
Right. And I think that's kind of how it started with, we, again, starting half the class in person and then moving it online, and all of us did our sort of like practicum effectively virtually as well. And we were all learning at the same time. The instructors, people who've been teaching yoga for 20 plus years are now trying to figure out how to do a Zoom class. Right. And like, so it kind of leveled the playing field in a way that nobody really, I think, anticipated. Yeah. And it made it, it definitely made me more confident. It also made me have to kind of like hone in once I did start teaching. Like, it's really hard to direct people in person. Like, it's really difficult to like you telling people to do stuff, and you realize it's really easy to get on top of yourself. And also like someone's like in a position, you're like, wait, what are we doing? Okay, let's come back to center or whatever. And when you're teaching online, you have to be, again, because people aren't looking, you're not in the room and they can't see you. So like you have to be incredibly direct, but also like pretty simple with your direction and your movement. Mm-hmm. Right. So it really lends itself to like, well, we're going to drill fundamentals. Like we're going to do very basic movements that I think people not necessarily, maybe not, I don't think take for granted is the right word, but I think that maybe don't realize that like, it's not just body mechanics, but it's also like, how does this feel for you to just do a very simple movement of rolling your shoulders up towards your ears as you breathe in and rolling them down as you exhale? What does that feel like? Yeah. What does that feel for you? Right. And like, you have that opportunity to just kind of like place people in that spot and just like have let them feel comfortable existing there. Yeah. Right. So I think it changed that. So when we did come back together, it was sort of like, there was a little bit more of an openness to realize like it didn't have to just be in studios. Like we can do this shit wherever we want, and it was super fortunate that Metropolitan reached out and was like, do you want to do this here? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. So like,
Metropolitan's a brewery that's right on the river with floor length windows. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful room to do yoga in, and it just feels like the most like amazing like opportunity and privilege to be able to do this thing that like I was doing in my living room, now like with people who are like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do that. Like,
did you just know them? So to step back a little bit, you started Do Movement online and you were working for Four Hands at the time, and was it just for kind of industry people at first, or?
I think that like I always had a vision when I started the teacher training. When I was thinking about like, well, why do I want to do this? One was just like to learn more about the history of yoga and how it came to be, and what it is here and the good and the bad that comes with all of that, and like what that is. And I wanted a deeper understanding of it, and it gave an opportunity to practice, obviously. But part of it was just like this idea of like, man, this could help a lot of people who wouldn't show up here or don't, classes are early mornings, mid-afternoon, sure, like all this stuff. But it's like when you have a bartending shift that you get home from at 4 a.m., you're not getting up for the 8 a.m. class. Yeah. And maybe you're not getting up for the noon class. And if there's no 2 p.m. class, because why the fuck would there be, you're probably not going to go, right? Yeah. And so having that in mind of just like how much this like mindfulness and movement aspect could help like my friends, like my buddies, you know. And also part of it was just like, I think at the time, you know, even it wasn't that long ago, but there was a different attitude towards like who did yoga and who was what people looked like and how you were going to show up for it. So I think that like, I kind of wanted to be able to like take this thing to my friends and be like, yo, we can do this, like this, and this is good for us. Like,
yeah,
we go out and rip shots all the time. Like, that's fine. Like, but eventually, like, that's not as sustainable as like, we can just get together and move and breathe a little bit and like listen to good tunes. So like the music came on eventually, but my, like a goal of mine was always to just like, let's set a vibe for people who want to do this, but don't really know how to get into it.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've said, jokingly, I've been like, we got to trick them a little bit, and then like pretty soon you realize you're doing some cool shit and you're like, oh yeah, this is fun, you know. So like I think the music helps with that a lot. Like it's the people that are showing up to it, I think are showing up specifically, honestly, like I think most of the time I'm like, yeah, this is like a music first class, and like we're gonna kind of like roll around on the ground a little bit and, like,
yeah,
you know, get our lungs expanded and stretch our hips a little bit. But like it's just sort of like having that attitude of like, come as you are, show up, everybody's gonna be cool.
And the fact that it's at a brewery and you get a beer afterwards.
Like, yeah. how are you gonna beat that, you know?
Yeah.
In a beautiful space, like just a beautiful space. It's wild.
It's how did that relationship with Metropolitan start? Did you just know them?
I have a friend who had started working for them, and they were looking to start doing yoga again after everything opened back up. Yeah. And she reached out.
And your classes typically every other Sunday, correct?
Twice a month. I'm on effectively. I know I'm second and fourth say, but like, and then Sarah, she does the other classes and she's absolutely incredible. So there's yoga 4 days a month every Sunday at Metropolitan, and I'm doing 2 of them. Nice.
And do you see that you get a lot of repeat people?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of people who are coming every class, you know, every other class. We have a bunch of regulars. And I would say like, I don't think it's like all regulars. Like it's definitely like new people kind of cycling through, but a lot of familiar faces coming out. And again, like it's cool because like we're doing a new playlist every single class. So like it is part of, I mean, at least I think it is part of the draw, you know.
Yeah.
Like you get people who are as much into the music as the movement.
Yeah, it is awesome because I feel like, so the class I went to, I don't know if it was a month and a half or 2 months ago at this point, but it was like heavily focused on like free jazz doom metal.
Yeah.
And I loved, it's kind of like a ambient sort of sound where, you know, like that droning, like ambient, I don't know if it's attributable to doom metal or a specific metal. I don't know much about it, but I loved the vibe of it. Like it was, again, when I told people I was going to go do it, they were like, doom metal? Like what? Like you don't like doom metal? I don't. But it was totally accessible, even if you're not into the music. Yeah. And I thought it was cool to sort of like pick out the free jazz elements. Like you had dudes going crazy on the saxophone. Like,
yeah. I think that like, again, if we're talking like sustainability and what makes me excited and what kind of like keeps moving it forward is just like that once the realization of like it, like there's not going to be an opportunity, things are going to get pretty repetitive if we just stick to like it's only doom.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I kind of figured that out early on. So it was like, okay, well, what do we do from here? And like, how can we find, how do we keep doing this in a way that's novel but familiar, right? And so I think that part of that was like, it's been really great to, as much as like I've learned and like grown in my yoga practice doing this, like the chance to just like find new music blogs and find new playlists that get updated and just like figure out like what works best for the class and like how we're gonna structure it, right? It's like eventually I kind of was like, all right, you know, like 6-minute songs, minimal vocals, you know, as long as it's like, it can get chaotic, but as long as it calms down for a little bit. So it's like, you really got to like start listening to music in a different way, you know? And so it's been cool to just like, there's certain times that I'll just like put on a playlist and go move around and be like, this isn't it, let's go back, try something else. And like, it's fun. It's just like, it really like creatively feels like a way to keep myself, kind of like learning about a genre that I didn't really know a ton about, that I liked and enjoyed, but really was able to like appreciate in a really different way that I didn't really think I would like would ever come together like that.
Yeah. And I loved when I talked to you after the class and just sort of picking your brain about the whole process. And I loved how you specifically designed the movements and like pick the songs and put them together to where you have maybe like this, like more of a crescendo song, like towards the middle, but then, you ramp it down towards the end. And I love the nerdiness, even though it's not my favorite genre or a genre I know anything about. I love the concept of what you're doing and how much you love it, and you can tell that you're passionate about it. And I love that. And I will say, you had mentioned that you were on like some subreddit or something that day for the doom metal free jazz.
Oh yeah.
And so is it like just you sort of like find a rabbit hole and then you're like, okay, I'm going to try and form a class around this, or like
sometimes, yeah, I think it depends on, I kind of set it up to where like sometimes it comes to me, I'm like, I want to do this pose, like this is what we're going to like work towards doing, and then we're going to ramp down from there. Mm-hmm. And based off that, it's like, okay, well, we're going to need to do this stuff to get ourselves ready to be there. Okay, so that's a little bit more energetic. We're going to go with a big up class, like we're going to go with a bigger playlist this week, and then like that's where I'll start from. Sometimes it's like I'll be on a playlist, I'll be listening to something, be like, that song's going on there, and like it'll build
from there,
kind of organically around there, sometimes like intentionally, and so it just kind of depends. And like I love requests, like literally like movement requests, music requests, kind of like anything that anybody wants to suggest, like, yeah, let's do it. Like I really do try to make, like, for me too, like it is not lost on me that like people show up on a Sunday morning to do this. Like I'm very grateful for everybody that comes to this. So I just want to make sure that like everyone feels like it's theirs too. Like this isn't just like show up, I'm going to tell you what to do. Like I really like to start letting everybody know, like, you know your body best. Like whatever you want to do is great. Like I'm giving you polite suggestions. Like if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, and I'm not offended. Like, you know, like you're not in competition with anybody here. You're not in competition with yourself. And then just say like nothing matters for the next 45 minutes. Like we're literally just going to like do some cool shit.
Yeah.
You know, I want it to be sort of like I would be doing this anyway. Thank you for being here with me.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that like when that comes into play, like people request bands or songs pretty frequently. It's like, fuck yeah, that's what we're doing this week, you know? So it kind of depends, but yeah, it generally, it's like this week, like straight up, I'm teaching on Sunday. I don't have playlists together yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like that's going to be part of it, is like listening to music on the way over and kind of just like figuring it out. Like we'll put something cool together. But yeah, sometimes it comes together really quick, and I always have like a few albums saved just to like kind of listen to see if it works or not. And again, that's the coolest thing, is like if it doesn't work, I just listen to like a really rad album. Yeah. You know, I've found as many albums that I've not moved to as we've used in playlists and stuff. So
I love that. And I will say to anyone listening who's interested, you do have your classes, but then you also publish, for lack of a better word, your playlists on Spotify. And I just wanted to look it up. So it's Considered Doom as a profile, and then you do it Doom Movement, and then whatever the date is. So like if you go to a class and then you like, be like, what was that song? And, you know, the third or fourth song, you can always go back or just listen to the tracks and do your own movements, which leads me to, I wanted to say, my wife and I, we've done like that yoga with Adrian on YouTube or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So just like real simple stuff. So I don't know a lot of the names of the movements and the poses. Like I know downward dog, obviously, but I just wanted to say, as somebody who's a novice with yoga and a novice with metal, it was very accessible. I loved it. And listening to you speak about having to do the 200-hour course online and how that leveled the playing field and how you had to be more descriptive. Like I feel like that really feeds into the class, because you weren't saying, oh yeah, I do this pose. Like you may mention what the name of the pose is, but it was more, all right, let's reach over, put our right hand by our left ankle. Or whatever. Like it was totally accessible for somebody who doesn't do yoga.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that like another part of it is that like I look at it as though like I don't, in terms of like calling it yoga, I think is like, again, like it's beyond semantics. It gets, you know, and not it, this. We don't need to get in the weeds about all of it. I think that like, again, partially the expectation, but like if you're looking for the classes that people will, like instructors are going to tell you the name of the poses in Sanskrit, and like those are vital and essential, and then you should seek those out if you choose to. And also like there are ways to get into building up to that. And I think that like what I'm trying to offer is that like we're starting from a place of like, just come in and get comfortable. And like, if you want to go and like do those next steps and like find those next things, like I encourage everyone to do it. Yeah. Right. But like, I think that it does like there needs to be a level of like, come on in and show up, and like, you don't have to worry about knowing everything. Like, I don't know everything. I forgot a lot of shit. Like, there's been plenty of classes where like midway through, I'm like, I don't know what we're doing right now. Like, let's just reset, you know? So it's like those moments happen and everything, but I think that it's creating a space to just be able to say like, this is cool. Like, you can do this. Like, and we're going to do it together. And we're all going to feel a little bit awkward about it, but like, it's fine. We're going to have fun.
Yeah. I definitely want to go back. It's like one of those things where my weekends have been booked with kids, but it's something I want to go back to for sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Doom before we move to the rapid fire questions?
No, man, I think I'm good. Like, I really, again, like, appreciate you giving time for it. Like, it's kind of like this thing that we started, and like, I'm just like really, really excited to be able to offer it to people. So
I do want to ask, what's you have an Instagram for it? Is it?
It's at doom.movement on Instagram.
And then, you post stories, and
it's mostly photos that I take on walks.
Oh, you take those? Okay,
all those photos. Yeah, those are my photos. Yeah. It's a lot of walkabouts on my own. So I'll see something and just snap a photo. It's mostly flowers and bugs.
Yeah, I was gonna say you should follow it even if you're not gonna do it, just for the photos.
Thank you. It's fun. Yeah, that's been like, again, like, it's just it's all kind of like, excuse me, it's all been a way to like flex some creative muscle and like incorporate stuff that like I love figuring out. Like, the flower kind of thing kind of came about because I downloaded Picture This as the flower identifying app,
I have
or the plant identifying app, and I was going around taking photos of plants and flowers and shit, and I was just like, wait, I'm taking all these, and I just started taking better ones for the gram, and that's kind of how it started. And I was just like, so now like, it's funny because like my wife and I will walk around the neighborhood or like go on a nature walk, and she'll be like, oh, that's a good Doom photo, and we just like kind of like keep an eye out for like what works, you know, like what that vibe and aesthetic is. So like,
I'll be interested to see how that evolves through winter.
It's great. You go down the lakefront in winter, you get some wild photos. It looks like a different planet. It's
awesome.
Great.
Yeah, the frozen waves are amazing. And I will say, so you can go through, it's an affordable price. I want to say $20.
It's $20.
20, yeah.
You get it's a 45-minute yoga class. I keep it super super tight to the time schedule. Starts at 10 a.m. And then you get a beer with your ticket. I think if you start a tab, you get a percentage off at the end of your bill or something. I don't exactly know if that's true. So sorry, Metropolitan, if that's not. I thought that was, but I might be making it up. But yeah, and it's like I said, it's a great time.
Yeah, it's on the Eventbrite page on Metropolitan's site also. All right, so with that said, we'll move on to the rapid fire questions.
All right.
And I'll just preface this by saying you're not on any time question. You can take time if you want to. And I just ask everybody, these are just fun questions. All right, so number 1, favorite beverage, doesn't have to be alcoholic or anything.
I think I'm a big bubble water fan. I don't really care what kind. I like bigger bubbles. But like a Topo Chico is like, I'm never going to be mad about a Topo Chico.
Very good. A song everyone should listen to.
Oh man. Holy cow.
And while you're thinking about this, I just tell everyone I'm going to be, after I launch this, I'm going to be creating a playlist on Spotify where everyone's suggestions go on it. So it's going to be a crazy wide variety of stuff. So it doesn't have to be anything.
Okay.
It could be your favorite song. It could be a song you think people should hear. Whatever you want to say.
I'm gonna throw a loop, and I'm gonna. I was just talking to another pal about this song, "Red Dust" by Billy Woods.
Oh, okay. Hip hop.
Yeah. I love it. I was like, first song I heard by him, and I was like, oh.
I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff, so that'll be the first thing I listen to.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
I'll check it out. All right, number 3, favorite concert you've been to.
Oh man, I think visually speaking, the music was awesome. I love the band, but I saw Godspeed You Black Emperor at Metro probably over a decade ago. But like the sound, like it sounded great, but like the visuals was just like brain melting. It was awesome.
Is that like just stuff that they're doing on stage, or like
no
props
so
they have?
They had a projector of like old like film reel, but they placed it so it shot up like off the entire like backdrop of the stage, so the band was saturated in it, and it was just like different. I forget what song they did it for, but they had like, it looked like when it started, it looked like a little like lighter flame, and as the song built, you realize like you were on a track and you were moving towards a fire in the desert, and it's just like this fire got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was just like, it was wild. I was like, weird. Like, how do you even conceptualize that? Where'd this come from? Like, it was visually stunning.
That's awesome. All right, number 4, favorite place you've had a drink, and this could be like time and place, vacation.
Favorite place I've had a drink. There's something really, really comforting to me about having a high life on the stool at Rainbow. That feels very like rooted at the center of the world for me.
Nice. All right, number 5, what's your guilty pleasure for music?
All right, straight up, I don't have guilty pleasures. Like, listen to what you listen to.
Yeah.
I'm like,
of course.
You put on T Swift, fine. Like, great, let's go. Like, I would say, I think if there's music that I feel like weird about listening to, I love like 80s new wave. I love like I just bought Tears for Fears vinyl. Like their vinyl, like the From the Big Chair. The record goes so hard, but like that era of just like synth pop is just like, I love it. Meatloaf too. Bad Out of Hell. Put on Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell, and tell me it's not a great time.
I'll listen to it. I was born in '87, so I kind of like missed the whole '80s wave. I've been going back, like Talking Heads. Yeah. I was at a restaurant and they had like the concert where the dude like David Byrne's wearing like the giant suit and stuff like that. Yeah. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then so like that's sort of been like my starting point where I've like been slowly like branching off here and there to like that genre of music.
Yeah, what's the other? Flock of Seagulls, Space Age Love Song. That song is like, it just goes so hard. It's great.
I'll have to check. I'll add it to the list. Things I need to listen to. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say, or anything you wish I would have asked you about? Or
no, man, I don't think so.
Awesome. And then, so how can people find you how can people find you in ways that you want them to find you?
Definitely Instagram. Doom.movement. Look that up. See some, like I said, see some cool nature photos. That's probably it. You might see me around town. I'm around town a lot, so I'll be out and about. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and like I said, I love your passion for things, and be it beverage and the music and the yoga. Just I felt like it fit perfectly for what I was trying to do here on this podcast, and so I really appreciate you coming on. Hey man, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody. Until next time, drink some new beer and listen to some new music. Cheers.